Today, the Supreme Court dealt a blow to the Voting Rights Act. In a 6-3 split, they struck down Louisiana's congressional map for creating a second majority black district following the 2020 census. Justice Samuel Alito wrote that it was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander in the majority's opinion. And he offered a revised interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which protects against racial discrimination in voting, but did not overturn it altogether. University of Michigan law professor Lee Lippman explains what that really means.
Justice Alito's majority opinion made it all but impossible to establish a violation of the Voting Rights Act, saying that in order for plaintiffs to succeed on a Section 2 claim to establish illegal racial discrimination in redistricting, they have to show that you can create an additional majority-minority district, including a majority black district, that would result in the same partisan breakdown as the state's chosen partisan breakdown, i.e. that the majority black district would have to vote Republican. This is, of course, describing a null set. So by making it impossible to establish a violation of the Voting Rights Act, he's all but nullified the law.
The nightcap is still here. Joel, another legalist on our air just a few hours ago, her response to today's ruling was, our democracy is standing in quicksand.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that this is a 5-alarm fire, but we're way past the 5-alarm fire.
Explain, because even for what I just went through, some people are like, what? Section 2, voting rights, how?
Well, because
Explain
this creates permission for Republicans to go all throughout the country, particularly all throughout the South, and take districts that represent historically underrepresented groups, mostly African-American groups. Places like Mississippi and Louisiana, where literally the entire point of the states prior to Reconstruction was to restrict the power of the vote of black people. There were laws that were put in place to make sure that those folks could be heard and could be represented. What the Supreme Court did today was they said, we're going to toss that out. We're going to toss out the protections that allow for those citizens to be represented. And to me, look, the story obviously is what happened today, but to me, the story goes back a generation or two, because this is a project that Republicans have been working on. Literally, I've been in government for more than 20 years. Since the time I've been in government, Republicans have been gearing up for this day. They've been loading people up on the court. They've been stealing Supreme Court seats. They've been putting out legal opinions, and they have been creating a facade of a legal argument that says these laws don't actually do the thing that they're supposed to do. So this is what we saw today was the end of a generation of Republicans building a case to take away power and take away voice from these folks, particularly in the Deep South.
And winning. Today, Brad Parscale, Trump's former campaign director, tweeted, if states are aggressive, we could see a healthy majority in the House perpetually.
Yeah, I mean, that's, just cementing Republican rule through partisan gerrymandering, which the court seems and sounds like it's fine with. I mean, to Joel's point, Sam Alito and John Roberts and Clarence Thomas cut their teeth on these issues in the 1980s under the Reagan court. And Clarence Thomas was a federal district judge, a federal court judge. Sam Alito and John Roberts were in the DOJ. They have had this project in mind to unwind civil rights progress of the 60s and 70s since then, and it is a multi-decade project culminating in all of this. They dismantled Section 5 during the Obama years. That was the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act, and then they dismantled another part of Section 2 earlier. This is the death knell for one of the last remaining bulwarks to ensure minority representation in elected office. I mean, it is a huge problem for this country, and it begs the question, is it time for Supreme Court reform? I mean, the court has issued these rulings that are so at odds with public opinion and so at odds with the basic idea of an inclusive and equitable democracy. I think it's a big question for Democrats should they regain power.
Okay, but even if Supreme Court reform is the future, that's way down the line. Tomorrow, Democrats wake up and do what?
Well, first of all, there's a huge question about which states move forward quickly on this. I mean, I think this is an arms race right now for redistricting to see if the parties can stack up the odds in their favor ahead of November. And I think it's telling that former President Obama sent out a message today saying this is another reason that Democrats need to show up, not just at the voting booth, but show up in large numbers. The win in November must be sizable, because if you win on the margins, it's going to be very tight. And the Republicans will do anything to ensure that Mike Johnson retains hold of that gavel. So if in the immediate, I think the only answer is to show up in big numbers in November to ensure a large enough majority that you can overcome the, institutional perversion of the congressional maps.
And just really quickly, it shouldn't be lost that as this was happening today, also in Florida, Ron DeSantis shoved through a ridiculous gerrymander in Florida, which, yes, I understand the Democrats have been fighting fire with fire on this, but Democrats actually in several states went to the voters and allowed voters to vote on it. Ron DeSantis is going to push through a legislature, through a redistricting through the legislature that is going to strip down that map and take away even more opportunities for people in Democratic districts to be heard. So this is actually, I think, Republicans fighting back against being outgunned on redistricting up to now. This is Republicans' answer to that, in my opinion.
Then did the redistricting fight become a redistricting supercharged war starting today until these midterms?
Yeah, I think it was underway, but I think it ramped up as a result of this, of course. And you asked me a few minutes ago about how Democrats, Republicans communicate with their constituents. I think this is a huge issue for Democrats, especially just to talk about the importance of this. So you bring up 5 alarm fire or something more serious than that. I mean, I think that it's incumbent upon Democrats to explain to the American people, as you've just asked us to do here, why this is so important, why this is so seismic, because it has to do with history, not incredibly long history. I mean, you're talking about this being something that was taking place over the course of a generation, but there are people who haven't lived through the way the electoral system, these maps were set up before all of this changed. And I think it, again, incumbent upon Democrats to make that case, to make Americans understand why this is so crucial and why it's so different.
What makes the United States, the global superpower, right, is we have 3 separate but equal branches of government, so on and so forth, is what happened today inside baseball, or our world leaders? Is the globe looking at this saying this is another thing that's chipping away at the America we know and our democracy?
Absolutely. And this was the courts. Essentially, and this goes back to what you mentioned, which was the Supreme Court has ruled, a conservative majority, that gerrymandering is fine. But if you're trying to set up a congressional district, racial gerrymandering is illegal. And this is sort of these conservative legal theories leading to this unbelievable brass-knuckle hyper-partisanship, where you can craft, congressional maps that are completely biased towards one party or the other if you control the state legislature. That's legal. And in this 2019 ruling about gerrymandering, John Roberts said the courts can't decide what's a fair map and what's not a fair map. And that's the courts abdicating. But it's just, these theories are dangerous to me because the basic idea of fair play, and you have mixed districts and, you get a purple district here and there, is all being thrown out the window. And then just jumping towards Trump, it's also this massive infusion of power, a separate conservative theory of the executive, the presidency. And all the power going to President Trump, all the power going to state legislatures. There's just, our checks and balances are eroding.
And it's our checks and balances. That's my point. That's what makes us great.
That's exactly the point, right? If you're overseas, maybe you're not concerned about the 5th district in Mississippi, but you are concerned about the fact that there is no check on executive power. Why? Because the House Republican caucus has neutered itself. The conference has neutered itself. And until and unless you have a legislative branch that can actually act as a check on the executive, or at least some semblance of separation of power, you're going to continue with these hugely unwise and unconstitutional decisions to do things like, launch a war in Iran with no thought to its implications on the global economy.
You win an election, you draw the maps you want that are going to win an election. You wage war on whatever country you want, and you prosecute your rivals at will. All of that is happening right now in the United States of America.
So the Republicans say, we're done trying to win votes. The strategy is to change the map. And they succeeded.
Well, they want to pick their voters. I mean, that's what Republicans pretty easily are telling you. And by the way, they don't care who they run over against that. Look, I think Republicans right now, and I'm not just talking about Republicans in elected office, but Republicans in Republican high society, they're like looters in a riot right now. They're going crazy because they got power. They're drunk on it. They also can see at the end of the line right there.
They're making an extraordinary amount of money.
For sure. They have superpower, but they also know that accountability is coming. And so they're grabbing everything that they can grab right now that's not bolted into the ground. And they grab this just like they keep grabbing power, and they're going to keep doing it And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if they go and they try to shore up the courts after they get their tail kicked in November. Like I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Alito and Thomas get talked off the court so that they can actually hold this supermajority for an even longer period of time.
Yes.